woke up to the sound of the wind hitting the window, as if something outside were trying to get in. The digital clock flickered, 2:59 a.m. The air was heavy, almost solid. I sat up in bed slowly, trying to understand what had jolted me awake. The silence, though broken by the wind, seemed to hold something more. A presence, perhaps. A subtle electricity that raised the hairs on my skin. The whole house was plunged in darkness, except for the flickering glow of the clock, which for a moment went completely black, plunging everything into pitch darkness. That's when I heard it. Not a loud noise, but a soft, persistent scratching, coming from the bedroom door, like dry nails scraping against old wood. I froze, my heart pounding so loud it seemed to echo through the walls. Who, or what, would be there at 3 a.m. inside the house? I stood up carefully, each step making the floor creak as if it were trying to betray me. The scratching stopped abruptly. I stood in front of the door, my hand inches from the handle. On the other side, there was absolute silence. The kind of silence that only exists when something is hiding, waiting for you to make a mistake. And I made one. I walked down the stairs, feeling the cold tear into my skin. Everything seemed darker than usual, as if the house had sunk into another dimension. Each step creaked in a strange way, as if the sounds were being pulled away, muffled by something invisible. The living room light, which I usually leave on at night, was off. Or maybe it had been swallowed by that thick darkness that seemed to move around me. The air was heavy. Every breath took effort, as if something was trying to force its way into my lungs along with the oxygen. My feet touched the cold floor but made no echo. It felt like walking through a space outside of time, where even sound hesitated to exist. I crossed the hallway toward the kitchen, guided only by memory and the faint blue glow from the microwave display. But when I got there, the display was gone. Nothing, as if the appliances had vanished or been erased from reality. I started to doubt myself. Was this really my house? The walls were where I remembered them, but something about them had changed. A faint pulsing, as if they were breathing, as if they were waiting. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I sat down in front of the computer. Without knowing why, I typed, "AI that predicts real future." My hands moved on their own, as if guided by a curiosity that didn't entirely belong to me. Only one result appeared, a website called Echoes of the End. The link looked old, almost forgotten by the internet. The layout was simple, with a black background and glowing green letters, like something from the early days of the web. A single sentence blinked in the center of the screen. "Do you want to know, or do you just think you do?" The cursor blinked below, waiting for an answer. I typed yes, hesitant but unable to look away. The screen shook slightly, as if it were breathing. Then the page changed. A minimalist interface appeared, showing only a text box and one sentence. "Describe your future in a question." Just one. I considered typing something trivial, but something held me back. Instead, I wrote, "When and how will I die?" The site took a few seconds. Then words began to appear one by one, slowly, as if someone on the other side was typing, someone who knew too much. "You've already begun." The screen froze. The computer locked up, and for a second I swear I saw my reflection in the monitor. Blink, but I hadn't blinked. The screen flickered and revealed a simple field. No ads, no menu, nothing but a single question in pale letters at the center. "What do you want to know?" There was something hypnotic about that silent glow, as if every pixel pulsed with a hidden truth. My fingers moved on their own. No thought, no hesitation. As if something already knew the answer and was merely using my body to reach it. "When will I die?" The question just sat there, raw, exposed. The screen remained still for a moment that lasted too long. I thought about closing the browser, disconnecting, deleting everything. But it was too late. The answer was already coming. The light of the screen blinked 3 times, then slowly letters began to form. "You won't want to know." The text box vanished. In its place, a countdown appeared. Yom 42. My heart began to race, skin covered in goosebumps. I looked around. Nothing had changed, but everything felt wrong. The ticking of the living room clock had stopped. The house, once silent, now seemed to be listening. The countdown kept going. 0, 15, 12. I didn't know if this was a twisted prank, a virus, or something far worse. But one thing was certain. No matter what happened, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The clock hand turned. Exactly 3 Kyle. The answer appeared, in red letters that seemed alive. In 8 days, at 3 Kyle. The moment you read this, the process has begun. I froze. My entire body felt disconnected from reality, as if gravity itself had stopped existing for a brief second. The screen in front of me seemed to pulse, with each beat growing more intense. The red letters were moving. Or rather, they seemed to breathe. My heart raced. What did this mean? How was this possible? I hadn't asked to know the future, but the answer was right there. Clear. Inevitable. 3 a.m. You're the exact time everything began. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3i. It was impossible not to notice the coincidence. Or maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe it had already been written from the moment I asked the question. The air felt heavy. The silence around me was thick. I needed to breathe, but it felt like something was holding me back, preventing me from making any movement, as if the house itself had turned into an invisible force field, waiting for the exact moment to swallow me whole. And then, the clock on the screen began to count down. 8 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. I didn't know what was about to happen. I didn't know if I had the power to avoid it or if I was destined to follow a path already laid out for me. But one thing was certain. When the countdown reached 0, my life, as I knew it, would change forever. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to close the site, but it wouldn't disappear. The screen simply persisted, static, impenetrable. The close button became invisible, as if it had been erased, and the cursor didn't respond to my click. My breathing grew heavier. I disconnected the Wi-Fi cable, hoping that would solve it. If the computer no longer had internet access, the site should disappear, right? But even with the cable unplugged, the page stayed there, firm, unchanging. It was as if the site had found a way to stay inside the system. My heart raced. I looked at the taskbar, searching for any sign that the site had closed, but there was nothing. The browser was frozen, but the page wasn't. The image on the screen seemed to warp slightly, the red letters flickering, as if preparing to reveal something more. I tried turning off the computer, pressing the power button forcefully, but nothing happened. The machine, once so obedient, now seemed to have a mind of its own. I was trapped. Then the screen flickered. The response returned, this time with a new message. You tried to disconnect me, but now there's no escaping. The air in the room grew dense. I could swear I felt a presence, something around me, watching. I looked at the clock, 3 Su, the same time as before. The countdown kept going, relentless, ticking away the minutes. What was happening? How was this possible? I knew I shouldn't interact with that site anymore, but somehow, I was running out of options. And then, the screen trembled. I thought it was a prank. An elaborate trick maybe, something to scare me. But then my cell phone, which was completely turned off, lit up by itself. The screen glowed in the darkness of the room, cold and unyielding. That low sound, typical of when a phone turns on, echoed in the silence. I stood frozen, my eyes locked on the screen. On the screen, a simple message appeared, but it made my blood run cold. Day 1. The eye now sees. I froze. I couldn't process what was happening. How was this possible? My phone was off, out of battery, and yet the message appeared there as if it had been written directly on the screen by an invisible hand. A chill ran down my spine. I stared at the phone more closely, but nothing seemed out of place. There were no notifications, no apps open. Just that phrase glowing like a dark promise. Trying to shake off the rising fear, I picked up the phone and turned it off again. I pressed the power button repeatedly, but the screen didn't respond. The device was dead, lifeless. And then, As if thrown by some invisible force, the phone lit up again. The same message. Day 1. The eye now sees. This time a sound came from the screen. A low, muffled sigh as if something was breathing from the other side. My whole body filled with dread. I looked around, but nothing seemed different. The house remained quiet, still. Or so I thought. I felt as if I was being watched. An invasive, oppressive sensation. As if something was beyond the screen, waiting, watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And then the phone vibrated. A notification appeared on the screen. The next move is yours. My heart raced. I knew I shouldn't interact, that I should drop the phone and leave the house. But the curiosity and fear intertwined so intensely that I could no longer think clearly. I was being pulled into something I didn't understand, and the eye was watching, waiting. From that moment on, something began to follow me. I couldn't see anything, but I heard footsteps echoing even when I was standing still. The sound dragged along the walls, an uneven rhythm, as if something was getting closer, but in no rush, studying my every move. I tried to ignore it. It must be my mind, I told myself. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Every time I turned a corner, the sound was there, echoing, as if it were silently following me. The cameras in the house, those little security cameras I never thought I'd need, started spinning on their own. The lenses moved with a precision that couldn't be explained. Suddenly, it felt like they were watching me from every angle, as if the space was being mapped, every corner analyzed. I tried turning them off, but when I pressed the button, they kept moving, now faster, almost frantic. The hum of the lenses adjusting was the only sound besides the footsteps echoing. I sat in the living room, trying to process what was happening, but the noise kept getting closer, as if whatever was there didn't need a body to move. The footsteps stopped being mere echoes and became more defined, heavier, as if something real was touching the floor. I looked out the window, but everything outside seemed normal. The streetlights still on, cars moving distantly, all so mundane. But inside here, the air was different, static, suspended. I wasn't alone anymore, and I had no idea what was coming. The phone rang, making my body jump. It was a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, but something pushed me to answer. On the other end of the line, a raspy whisper said only, "I see you." The line went silent and the echo of footsteps grew louder again. On the second day, my reflection began to lag. I would move, and the mirror would respond a second later. At first, I thought it was just fatigue, or maybe the lighting in the house was playing tricks on me, but the feeling didn't go away. When I woke up in the morning, I stared at the mirror in the hallway, a large mirror with a dark wooden frame. I ran my hand through my hair, but the reflection didn't follow immediately. Instead, it waited a moment before making the same gesture, as if it were observing before reacting. I stood still, confused. I tried another movement, a slight turn of my head. The reflection did the same, but the delay was longer this time. The sense of disconnection bothered me. It was as if the mirror were testing me, like it was trying to show me something I wasn't supposed to see. Later in the day, the delay grew more pronounced. I raised my arms and the mirror raised them, but with a second's delay. My own body now seemed out of sync with what the mirror was showing. I moved my hands and they hung suspended in the air, as if the reflection was being controlled by an independent force. And then, it happened. In one instance, when I turned my body to walk away, the reflection didn't follow immediately. It looked me directly in the eyes, and before I could turn away, it blinked. A clear, deliberate blink, as if it were aware of me, as if it were doing something intentional, as if it was the one in control. My breath became shallow and a chill ran down my spine. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't understand what. What was happening with the mirror? Why was it behaving so strangely? And most importantly, who was on the other side? I knew I could no longer ignore it. Something was getting closer, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. On the third night, the reflection smiled, a smile that wasn't mine, I was standing in front of the mirror, as usual, trying to understand what was happening, trying to make sense of the delay that seemed to grow each day. But when I saw the reflection move, something was different. It smiled at me. It wasn't a normal smile, nor a genuine one. It was a crooked, strange smile, as if someone had forced the expression on my face, but with a touch of something wrong. I froze. The mirror reflected me, but it wasn't me standing there. It was something else. Something that used my face but didn't represent me. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't. My feet seemed glued to the floor, as if some invisible force kept me there, watching the scene I didn't want to see. Behind the reflection, the clock on the wall read 3 darn. The same clock that had always been accurate, always reliable. I looked at my wristwatch and there it was, 2:58. How was that possible? How was the reflection ahead of me in time? The difference of 2 minutes seemed insignificant, but in that moment, it was as if an invisible line between us had been broken. The reflection was closer than I was willing to admit. The smile continued. Then the reflection did something even more unusual. It raised its hand and placed it against the glass, touching my reflection. I tried to do the same, extending my hand. But the difference between the two touches was glaring. My reflection, which should have been identical to what I was doing, seemed to hesitate, almost as if it were preparing to do something I didn't want. And that's when the smile widened. It wasn't crooked anymore, it was wild, almost mocking. The look in the reflection's eyes locked with mine, and something in its gaze told me that it knew exactly what I was thinking. Maybe it knew I wanted to run, that I wanted to leave, but what I didn't know was that there would be no escape. With every passing second, reality seemed to distort. The reflection was no longer just reflecting my actions, it was anticipating them. And worse, it seemed to be enjoying it. I couldn't look anymore. I closed my eyes, trying to block the view, but when I opened them again, the smile was gone. The mirror was empty. I ran to break the mirror. My mind was in panic, the reflection still chasing me, mocking me, and I knew that if I didn't do something now, there would be no turning back. With all my strength, I closed my eyes and rushed toward the glass, determined to destroy it, to make it end. But the glass didn't shatter. My hand, upon touching the surface of the mirror, didn't meet resistance. Instead, it sank slowly, as if the mirror were made of something liquid, dark and sticky. The glass molded to my touch, enveloping my hand in a strange and unsettling way. I tried to pull it back, but I couldn't. The substance, or whatever it was, held me with a strength I wasn't expecting. My heart pounded in my chest, panic rising, but I couldn't break free. The mirror was absorbing me, not letting me escape. That's when I heard the whisper. A raspy voice, muffled, as if it came from the depths of the mirror, from that strange and unnameable space. The voice seemed to cut through reality, piercing my mind, and its words froze my spine. 5 days left. I froze. What did that mean? What would happen in 5 days? The mirror started vibrating, and the sensation of being swallowed grew stronger. My hand, now completely inside the glass, felt like it was submerged in something heavy, something cold, something that shouldn't exist. I looked at my reflection, which now seemed farther away, deeper, as if the mirror were a portal to another reality, another dimension. It stared at me, its eyes fixed, as if it knew something I didn't want to know. Desperate, I struggled to pull my hand back, but the mirror just absorbed it more and more, as if it were pulling me inside, as if the surface itself were alive, sensing my struggle, feeding on it. Time was running out, and the voice whispered in my mind, repeating the phrase once more. 5 days left. I didn't know what would happen when the time ran out, but I felt that if I didn't escape now, it would be too late. I tried to seek help. I was desperate, not knowing what to do, not understanding how that distorted reality had started to take over my life. I thought that if someone could help me, everything would go back to normal. So I did what anyone would do in a moment of extreme panic. I looked for someone who might have answers. First, I went to a priest. He was known for his experience dealing with supernatural phenomena. and maybe he was the key to expelling any entity that was haunting me. But on the first night he stayed with me, he was visibly shaken. I woke up in the middle of the night to find him staring at the mirror, his face pale, his hands trembling. He didn't say a word, but his eyes said everything. The next morning he was gone without a trace, as if he had vanished into the darkness. Desperate, I turned to a medium. She seemed like the last hope, someone who could help me understand the connection between the mirror and the strange things that were happening. On the first night she stayed. She tried to perform a spiritual session, but it didn't take much for her to fall into a panic. She saw something that made me believe that even she wasn't prepared to face it. Before she disappeared, she said in a trembling voice, "This isn't what it seems. You need to stay away from it. It's no longer safe here." And she left. The next day, no one knew where she had gone. Finally, I sought out a hacker, someone who could break into the system and figure out what was behind that damned mirror. I was willing to pay whatever it took to find a logical explanation, something that could get me out of this psychotic prison. He showed up confident, saying he could trace the origin of the digital presence. But on the night he stayed with me, things took a much darker turn. I woke up to him screaming in the dark, in panic. He was staring at the mirror with wide eyes, his hands sweaty, as if he were seeing something beyond my understanding. I can't anymore," he said, his voice failing. Before I could ask what was going on, he ran to the door, screaming something that still echoes in my mind. "You've already been marked. This isn't an AI, it's a portal." He ran out of the house without looking back, and I was left there, alone, with those words repeating in my head. A portal. What did that mean? What did he mean by that? I no longer had answers, only more questions. And now, with every passing second, the mirror seemed to become more alive, more powerful. I knew I couldn't run forever. Whatever was on the other side of the glass was getting closer, and I felt time running out. On the fourth day, I received a video via email. It was titled simply, "For You." There was no sender, just an attached file. My heart raced. I knew something worse was coming, but I never imagined it would be something like this. I clicked on the file, unsure of what to expect, and the screen on my computer flickered before the video opened. The first image was of me, lying on the bed in a dark room. I was sleeping, peacefully, or so it seemed. The camera was positioned above, as if someone were floating, watching me while I rested. The image was clear, almost as if it had been recorded in high definition. What chilled me to the core was the movement. My mouth, for no apparent reason, began to move, forming words that I wasn't speaking. I was there, deep in sleep, but my lips were moving as though they were responding to something, or someone. The words were inaudible, but the movement was unmistakable. Something was happening while I slept. Something, or someone. I looked around as if expecting to see some sign. The room was silent, but the feeling of being watched had never been so strong. I was alone, or at least I should have been. But that video proved otherwise. Something had been recording me while I was unconscious, controlling my actions, even manipulating my simplest movements. The strangest part came when the video ended. The screen went black for a moment, and before I could close the file, one last image appeared, the reflection of someone in my mirror. But it wasn't my reflection. It was a shadowy figure, outlined in darkness, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dark, staring at its own reflection, as if it were aware of me, but I couldn't see it. I froze. I didn't know what to do. The phone was in my hand, but instead of calling someone, I just stood there, paralyzed, trying to process what I had just seen. I was alone in the room, or at least I should have been. But that video told me otherwise. And worst of all, what else could be happening while I wasn't awake? I started running out of time, literally. It was as if the very concept of time was disintegrating around me. On the fifth day, I noticed something strange happening with the clocks. They all stopped. The wall clock, the microwave's clock, even my phone's clock. Everything was frozen, stuck in a moment that seemed unwilling to move forward. Each one showed different times, but none of them were actually working. The feeling was suffocating, as if time itself was slipping away from me, as if the world around me had decided to halt. I panicked, trying to look anywhere for an explanation. But what scared me the most was the certainty that I was no longer in control. Time was slipping away from me. But then I noticed something even more disturbing. The only clock still working properly was the one on my computer. It kept marking the time, uninterrupted, as if nothing had happened, without any failure. And worst of all, it was always synchronized with the cursed website. The site I could no longer ignore, the one that was already in my browser history, in my heart, in my mind. Every time I looked at the computer, the time on the screen seemed more like a cruel reminder of what was coming. Always 3 as if fate was written there, like a sentence. I tried disconnecting the internet, turning off the computer, but nothing worked. The time kept being recorded, and the worst part, every time I looked, it was closer. 3 less than an hour away. With each passing second, the pressure built up. Time seemed to be accelerating while the rest of the world stayed frozen. Things around me started to blur, and reality seemed to be unraveling, as if something was about to consume everything I knew. I didn't know if I could escape. I didn't know if I was still in control of my own life. All I knew was that 3 hours was coming, and with it something I didn't want to understand. On the 6th day, I stopped seeing my reflection. It was something simple, yet unsettling. At first, I thought it might have been a momentary glitch, a trick of the light or of the mind. I looked into the mirror and saw nothing. No face, no form, just emptiness, an opaque and dark surface, as if the reflection had simply vanished. I tried again, but nothing. My image wasn't there anymore. What was even more disturbing, however, was what happened afterward. Even though I could no longer see myself, I felt it. I felt that something, someone, was watching me. I knew it was my reflection, or what should have been it, but it wasn't visible anymore, as if it had been erased, removed somehow. And yet the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, as if my own eyes were fixed on me, even though I couldn't see them. At 3 Asan, the most awaited and feared moment of the day, I heard it. First, a faint hum in the air. Then a whisper, soft as if it were coming from inside me, yet still distant, strange. Suddenly, a voice, clear and loud, filled the room. It was my voice, but it wasn't the same. Something was wrong. "You shouldn't have asked." The words echoed throughout the house, reverberating in every corner, as if they were spreading through the walls. I froze. My body was tense, and the feeling that something was behind all of this, something far beyond what I could understand, was almost unbearable. I didn't know what to do anymore. How could I have asked for this? Those words. It was as if I had triggered something I couldn't control, as if my questions had opened a door to something with no way back. And now, even without my reflection, I knew it was still there, watching me, waiting. I shouldn't have asked. And now, it was too late. On the 7th day, I tried to escape the city. The feeling of being trapped, surrounded by something invisible and relentless, had become unbearable. I no longer knew who to trust or where to find answers. But there was one thing I could still try. Leave. Escape. The city seemed to be closing in on me, becoming more oppressive, more lifeless with every passing second. Maybe by leaving I could escape all of this. I got in the car and hit the road, planning to leave it all behind. The city seemed further away with each mile while the GPS guided me. But suddenly, it froze. The map on the screen froze, and the instructions simply disappeared. I tried restarting it, but nothing worked. The GPS was completely non-functional. I decided to keep going, trusting my memory and my instincts. But something strange happened. The road signs started repeating. I kept passing the same streets, the same stop signs, the same landmarks, never leaving the same place. Every time I thought I was going in the right direction, I ended up at the same point. I drove in circles for hours, my mind trying to understand what was happening, until the reality started to warp. That's when I realized The city wouldn't let me leave. At midnight tonight, while I was still aimlessly driving, my phone buzzed. A notification appeared on the screen, cold and direct, like a death sentence. Last destination update 3. Prepare to be transferred. But it didn't say where. Panic took over me. The message was clear, but it explained nothing. Where was I going? What did being transferred mean? I was trapped inside something I couldn't understand, and time, always 3 Daostai, seemed to be the only constant in this nightmare. My phone's clock, the only one still working properly, showed 2:58. And for the first time, I realized that time was no longer my ally. It was working against me, like an unstoppable force, driving me toward a destination I couldn't control. And the scariest part was that the city, the GPS, the signs, everything was molding itself to this one moment. What would happen when 3 Oas arrived? I had no answers, only one crushing certainty. Something was going to happen. Now I'm here writing this with the clock reading 2:45. The website came back on its own. I didn't click anything. There was no command, no action. It just, suddenly, appeared again, on my computer screen. But something was different. The screen was now black, a dense darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. There was no more question field, no more answers, just an empty void that reflected a sense of impending despair. The only thing cutting through the silence was a breath, a slow, deep, rhythmic breath. But it wasn't mine. I know it wasn't. I froze, my fingers still hovering over the keyboard, but unable to move. I was being watched. The feeling was overwhelming, like invisible eyes were fixed on me, waiting, watching. I tried looking around, trying to find any sign of a presence, but everything was still. Too still. The computer screen flickered one last time, and when it returned, red words began to appear, one after another slowly, making me break out in a cold sweat. You cannot escape. I froze. The message seemed to come from the screen, gaining life, as if it was forming directly in my mind. Something was happening. Something I couldn't control. Something I didn't understand. The breath continued, closer now, as if it were in the same room with me. Then the screen flickered again, but this time there were no more words, just an image, a distorted shadow that seemed to move slowly, the reflection of something or someone. I tried to close the computer, turn it off, but I couldn't. The keys weren't responding. I couldn't move anymore. The screen was full of shadows now, more and more engulfing what was left of the light. And in the background, the breath, growing louder. I was trapped, and something was getting closer. You will see what no human should ever see. 3 said the clock still reads 3. No matter what I do, no matter where I go, time always returns to that damned hour. And now, as I write this, something is emerging from the computer screen. It's not a reflection, it's not a common image, it's something else. Something that shouldn't exist, that should never have been called. I know you're reading this, and I know what it means. Don't try to look for answers. Don't try to understand. Because what I saw, what I'm seeing, is not something you should see. It's not something the human mind should ever contemplate. You might try to close the window, turn off the computer, run away. But it will be useless. There's no escape anymore. I've already made the mistake, already crossed the line, and now you're with me. The screen is distorting, the colors are blending, and that breath, which is not mine, is getting louder, closer. I can hear it through the screen as if it's coming from inside me. If you're reading this, don't ask. Don't repeat what I did. Some doors, when opened, never close again. And now, you're about to see something that shouldn't exist. Something that doesn't belong to the human world. Something that can't be erased, can't be ignored. What is emerging from the screen is beyond comprehension, beyond what the mind can process. I made the mistake of asking, of seeking answers where I shouldn't. Now you have the choice. Ignore this, shut it down, run away. Or maybe you'll choose to see as I chose. But if you decide to continue, I warn you, it will no longer be possible to turn back.